Okay, so the framing of that question sort of requires some deconstruction. So there is a general notion that only youths uh, have idealistic tendencies, and I usually tend to disagree with that. I've seen youths that understand the reality of the situation and are able to address it very, 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 without any rose-tinted glasses, and are able to then deal with the situation. Having said that, there is also a position where you have quite a number of youths that have idealistic views of things and the reality of the Nigerian state. So, for example, with the most recent movement, the NSARS movement, there were many of the young people that participated in that movement that essentially um, met the reality of the brutality of the Nigerian state head on for the first time. Many did not realize the kind of states that they were up against. Having said that, I think there are a few things that the youth we need to put together in order to be able to negotiate with the Nigerian state. I think organize, as we have seen many of the people in the past have done. And in organizing, there are various pockets of, if you may, structures that need to be in place in order to be able to engage the states in a way that will drive change. So there needs to be centers of economic power. I have a theory that there needs to be centers of economic power in the youth. Fortunately, the current young generation have been able to achieve a degree of economic prosperity that is independent of the Nigerian state, and therefore they're able to fund the organizations and the movements that come to bear. It was one of the reasons why the Nigerian state was flailing as to how to handle the most recent movement, because they couldn't understand how the flows of funding was happening. That's very important. But it's also important to, as we have seen, be then able to organize, connect people, and be very, very strategic in terms of how you then negotiate with the state with the instruments that the state will respond to. Um, I'm very pleased that a couple of people were able to, um, for example, use the tools of the panel to essentially show the insincerity of the state in how they have gone about organizing panels, for example. That's very important. You need to engage, not desist. What would have happened would have been that people did not engage with those panels, and then the panels would have gone on, and the insincerity of those panels would not have come to the fore. So um, I think that would be my opening thoughts with regards to the question. Um, Back to you, please.
All right, thank you very much. And might I add quickly that for all the participants here, please, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box and they will be responded to as we go on. Now to Charles. Now, seeing as Nigerians, especially the youth these days, have been demanding accountability from the government, more accountability from the government, what tools are there to effectively demand accountability from those in office beyond protests, seeing as protests cannot happen every day or too frequently, rather?
Yeah, so definitely okay, thank you once again for this invitation. I'm here representing Hamzat Lawal, the CEO of Connected Development. So to address your question, so beyond physical protest, we've been able to organize and demand accountability using digital tools, that is social media and Twitter especially. And you see the repercussion of that is that immediately after the protests came to a halt or were suspended last October, we saw the government bringing back the anti-social media bill to stifle the young people in social media, right? Okay. So remember in 2019, when the bill came up, CSOs and young people and a whole lot of people came out and there was this overwhelming criticism that made the National Assembly suspend the bill, right? And then after the protest from the state houses of assembly to the National Assembly, the legislators want an anti-social media bill to restrict how we're able to demand accountability using digital tools, because it's easier to crush physical protests. We've seen that on and on through extrajudicial killings, through arbitrary arrests and detentions. During the EndSARS protest, I was up and down, trying to mobilize to get people representation in detention centers in FCT and Oshun, and so it's quite easier to crush physical protests when we are demanding accountability. But social media, it's where the government have not been able to successfully crush young people's drive and vigor. So I believe that the bill, in addition to the hate speech bill, the NGO regulation bill, and so many other regulatory frameworks being deliberated at the National Assembly, are an attempt to crush the will of the young people in demanding accountability. But I'm here to tell you that we're going to resist that at all costs.
All right, thank you very much. Once again, I'd like to remind you that if you have any questions as we go on, please put them in the chat box and we'll respond to them in due time. Now to Chioma. Now, I'd like to ask why there is a popular notion that politics is not for everyone, particularly young people. Now, seeing as, most of the population is made up of young people, now, why is it that there's a notion that politics is not for young people, and how can it be changed to be more inclusive, to make young people feel like they have a say in their country?
Thank you very much for that question. I don't know that there's a notion. I just think that it's a set of tools or a set of stereotypes that have been perpetuated over time. And again, the numbers do not support it. We have the youngest country on the continent. We have about 52% of registered voters aged between 18 to 35. So technically, it's actually an aberration that we have a government that's run by people who are not primarily made up of this number. I think young people now still make up less than 15% of elected officials in Nigeria. So it's not a notion, it's just something that's been passing. The same way you hear things like women don't support women. It's just things that have been passed down that we've kind of become acculturated to, which movements like the Not Too Young to Run movement and several movements seeking to empower women are trying to change.
Okay, so now seeing as it's simply a stereotype, stereotypes need to be challenged and need to be changed over time. So what steps do you think we can take towards changing this stereotype? Since it's not true, more people need to know that they have access. So how can they be more aware of their access to, real change in their society?
Thank you very much. So there are many steps to unseating stereotypes, right? And the first one is to explore legal routes. And this is what the Not Too Young to Run movement did with advocating for a change in constitution that allows more young people to run for office. So that's been done. The second layer of that work is ensuring that young people were indeed ready to run, and that gave birth to the Ready to Run movement of 2019. And the next layer to that was that we don't have enough people. We don't have enough women running for office. And again, there's a lot of work being done on the back end to ensure that by 2023, there are enough women who are running, but then they also have enough chances to win the elections they go for. So it's a multifaceted approach to unseating stereotypes, but there's also the part that the citizens must play, which is that they must get involved, right? Because what's the point of a bill that becomes an act if people don't run for office, if they don't join political parties, if they don't organize, if they don't actually get some skin in the game? There's also the place of the media. And I remember being in New York at the end of 2018 with the BBC and with the Not Too Young to Run movement to train journalists on gender responsive reporting. My organization, TechCar, earlier this year, before Corona and all of the restrictions, organized 60 journalists funded by the Ford Foundation with supporting funds from Rolla. And again, we train them on how to, be ethical, but also be sensitive to reporting gender, because these are some of the things that stop women from running for office. So it's a multifaceted approach, but we can't not talk about the place of citizens in all of this.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. So Dr. Henrietta, now as one who is passionate about socio-economic developments, what does a map of the long haul in bringing about social change look like?
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this. Talking about gender sensitive reporting, you have asked two men to speak before the ladies. Maybe next time we should do ladies first and then the men in between. But anyway, that's just on the side. So regarding your question, which is to say, how can we push for a better country going forward, or does that capture what you were asking?
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right. So I'll start by saying that for us to find the solution, we have to sit back and think about the problem, because Nigeria has been experiencing new lows in terms of leadership. Okay. We think someone is bad and then we go for another and it's even worse. And we found ourselves, just going from frying pan to fire, as the popular saying goes, to date. And the question is, how do we stop this? Because we risk falling to yet another low, whether the person is young or old. I don't think it's about age, okay, because you can find good and bad people in all age groups. And I think we need to sit back and ask ourselves what can bring about a change, what can help Nigeria to really begin to embark on the path of reform and progress. And for me, it will entail asking what kind of leaders do we need to have. And I think we need leaders with a deep sense of commitment to the common good, because this is the only way to deliver shared prosperity. No matter, we're all shouting end SARS now, end bad governance, end cost of governance, okay? But then, while that hue and cry is going on, because of course it's necessary to stop the current trend, we need to start simultaneously developing tomorrow's leaders, okay? And we need to begin to ask ourselves, what kind of characters do we need? I like very much this categorization by the Greeks, where they talk about the idiots, the kind of people that are found in every population, and they put them in three categories: the idiot, the tribesman, and the citizen. The idiot is described as a self-centered person, okay, who only thinks about me, myself, and I. The tribesman looks at everything, and of course, if that person becomes a leader, no matter what happens, it's just we're going to enter another disaster. Then you have the tribesman who looks at everything from the lens of where you're from, either your ethnicity or the church you go to, your religion, or the social class you belong to, or just has that lens to filter people. And if you don't belong to his ethnic group or his church or his social class, then you don't exist. Now, a leader like that delivers disaster. Okay? Then you have the citizen, those who are purpose-driven, those who seek transformation, those who care for the common good. Okay, so in terms of character, we have to look for citizens. And the good news is that even the idiot and the tribesman can become a citizen with formation and character building. And unfortunately, they say Nigeria has 90% made up of tribesmen and idiots. I don't want to believe that. I want to believe that we have more citizens. But what the point is that we have to begin to educate citizens either through television programs, radio programs, TV shows, on social media, so that we have people to choose from. If you look at the political system around the world, we're constantly needing to choose between a rock and a hard place, okay? Two evils, rather than have to choose between good and evil. So we need more options. We need to develop people with character, the kind of character that can produce good leaders. And then competence. Competence here refers to knowledge, okay? How many of us understand political literacy? How many of us know how the three arms of government, the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary work? Do we know how to get involved? Do we not understand the Constitution? Now it's coming out more and more on social media as people begin to see the need for better education, as our Constitution is so skewed that it will destroy even the best of us, and that the constitution needs not just to be amended, but to be scrapped and redone, because the constitution is actually against the people of Nigeria. Now, if you don't have this knowledge, it is difficult for you to be effective as a leader. And then capability, ability to execute, ability have to have positive energy. We need people who can actually do the job, not just talk about to be done, but actually do it. Now, when we go from advocacy, which is the enterprise process, to actually developing, working towards developing people who can, who have the right character, who are knowledgeable, and who have the competence and the then we're on the path to growth. Countries that have reformed and see what they did. If you look at Singapore, for example, Singapore was in very bad shape in terms of corruption, and they've been able to evolve themselves and transform themselves into a world power. Now, how did they do this? The first thing they did was have a sincere commitment to ending corruption, not the lip service we pay to it in Nigeria. So corruption was the works of try to end corruption. Somebody may need to mute when competing with somebody who is unmuted, maybe politics. Okay, so we need to have a sincere, sincerity of purpose in fighting corruption, but that won't happen until we have the right people in place. And then meritocracy, putting the best people in place. Okay, so right now Nigeria is riddled with tribalism. Okay, it's always about balancing, irrespective of who can do the job. I know that if we look at Rwanda, you see how Rwanda has been able to remove tribalism. You don't ask people whether you're Hutu or Tutsi anymore in Rwanda. In fact, if you ask the question, the first will give you an embarrassing look, and then they tell you we're all Rwandans. And I think that is one of the things Nigeria needs to begin to adopt. Because when we start having labels like Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, Tiv, Kanuri, we start, compromising on meritocracy. I listened, we all, the news about a Nigerian American being Joe Biden's deputy treasury secretary flew about, and we all rejoiced. But think about it. If he was in Nigeria today, would he have been chosen, given any office just because he's not from the north? Perhaps not. Most likely he would not have been given any office based on his ethnic origin. So we really need to see how we can remove this emphasis on ethnicity and focus on meritocracy. And then there was a strong focus on education in Singapore. And not just the kind of education we know today, but all types of education. Okay, so they looked at both. We can strengthen our formal system and the informal system of education. We can strengthen our technical education such that if you want to go into agriculture, you can be the best farmer in the world. If you want to go into technical skills like construction, or I don't know, tailoring, or food and nutrition, hospitality, you become the best in that, because we need all these services along with the other more professional services for the country to work well. So Singapore did these three things, which was eliminate corruption, focus on meritocracy, and strengthen the educational system, and they were able to emancipate themselves. Okay. Now, China was started to be communist, and all kinds of things, all kinds of slurs were unleashed against them by the Western countries. But they've done what nobody else has been able to do. They've pulled over 850 million people out of poverty. Their rate of poverty went from 88% of the population in 1981 to 0.7% by 2015. And more recently, they're said to have pulled out the last set of people who are living in extreme poverty. These are results, and these results have come from a serious commitment to the progress of the people and the country's economy. And so I think that between, between doing these things that need to be done, as well as preparing leaders who can form the political parties that by 2023 we can begin to choose from, we can then begin to envisage a better Nigeria. But definitely this work has to be done. Thank you.
Now, briefly, I'd like to ask a follow-up question. So you mentioned something that struck me and was very important, which was the education of the Nigerian people beyond, regular academics and into social political education. So now, how can the government, or rather, how can the people themselves enlighten one another to see a better Nigeria tomorrow or whenever?
So the beautiful thing about it is that the NSAS movement has awakened social anger, I would say. There are so many civil society movements that are now out there educating people about what needs to be done to get a better Nigeria. We have Enough is Enough. We have Fixed Politics, which has now come up with 3 main pillars, okay? Setting up a school for policy and political governance, okay? Energizing and empowering the electorate with information, as well as a team to look into policy reforms that are so important for us to see change, okay? Especially electoral reforms. There's no point everybody going out to vote and then we have a compromised electoral process that doesn't make our votes count. So electoral reforms, we need policy reforms to stem the abuses that are currently in government. And then, of course, education. Education is really, we can't overemphasize the importance. So many times you hear people getting carried away with, again, one of the Western ways to, confuse us as to how to progress towards economic emancipation, saying our population is too high. Our population is our asset. They form the market. Our problem has been the corruption that won't let us empower and educate our population. Okay. So,
okay.
But should I stop or do you want to?
No, carry on, please.
Right, okay.
Carry on, please.
So if we're able to educate our population to be good entrepreneurs, because there are many ways you can alleviate poverty and create wealth simultaneously. So just to give you a quick example, imagine you set up a construction skills training academy where you put, most of the area boys now who think that the only way they can make money is by, harassing drivers and public transporters. If you put these people in an academy and you train them to be certified plumbers, tilers, carpenters, electricians, etc., Africa and Nigeria is a growing nation. Africa is a growing continent, developing continent. Nigeria is a growing nation, which means that we're constantly building. These people will get jobs faster than MBAs, and they will. And once they have jobs and they have good salaries because they're qualified, they will begin to form their families and want peace. Okay. Again, another sector of the area boys can be trained to be security men. Security is now an issue in our country. And as I tell my students at the business school, at Lagos Business School, every problem is an opportunity. Okay, so if we can, and now more than ever before, every state needs to begin to develop security, the security body, because we don't know where all these killings are going to end. If we think it's going to stop in the north, we must be kidding. We need to begin to prepare, since we don't seem to be able to, the government doesn't seem to be able to secure us. And this creates a job opportunity for many people who are jobless today, either as supervisors, as trainers, or as the soldiers. Okay, so there's so many ways. Because Nigeria has many problems, we also have many business opportunities, because entrepreneurship is about providing solutions to problems in a profitable way. Okay, so if we're able to do this, we will see the beauty of our population. Okay, and we'll be able to see that our people are our assets and not our problem. Our problem is corruption that doesn't allow funds that can be used to develop our human capital resources properly.
All right, thank you very much. And back to Chioma. Now, seeing as people aren't interested in getting their PVCs, or maybe are frustrated, and there are so-called hoodlums who are hired to frustrate movements and voting registrations, even PVC collection. So now the question is, how can we educate, or rather, how can we involve everyone? Because most times it seems like there's an us against them faction. So how can we involve everyone to see that we're fighting for the same cause?
Thank you very much for that question. Again, multiple layers to response and multiple layers to educate people. There's the education that needs to be done online to people who have some sort of access to technology. There's a deeper level of education that needs to be done across the entire spectrum of people who don't have technology. It starts from people who are educated to people who are not educated. And I think that what a lot of people who work in education have failed with is that they have focused on only people who have social media. But if you look at the numbers and the data that comes from elections, there are more people without any form of technology who are standing in line on election day to vote than there are people who have some sort of technology. So there's got to be like an entire 360 strategy to ensure that both people with access to technology and literacy and people who are not can access this education.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So now what's so to Tunde, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, fantastic. Now, seeing as there's been recent developments or youth being involved, what exactly can the youth do? What is something concrete that you think the youth can do to trigger social change in their own personal spaces?
Okay. Thanks for the question. First, I'd like to think about this in multiple ways. First is that there's the participation at the political level where your level of participation is voting and making sure you are able to vote and making sure you have a PVC, making sure your voter, your PVC is moved to where you live and so you can vote when you need to vote. For example, today there's an election in Lagos that is ongoing and many people are not voting. Many people are not even aware there's an election ongoing. And it's a travesty that somebody becomes a senator in Nigeria by winning less than 10,000 votes. In a city, in a constituency that would have maybe 2-3 million people, and you win 10,000 votes and you become a senator because many people just do not participate in the voting process. But I think it was Dr. Herrera that mentioned that, there's also the problem of choice because people do not participate in the process of emerging as possible options. People do not participate in the political process so that they are on the table to be chosen as options. So for many people, when they then need to vote, they are compelled to vote two bad choices. It's one of the things that, for example, many people perceive to be happening in Lagos today, and maybe that's why many of them are not voting. But the question is, in the process of emerging as candidates for the senatorial elections that are ongoing today, how many people participated in the political process? And as young people, we need to become involved in the political process. That's absolutely crucial. Another duty that we owe, because not all of us will be involved in the political process, is to, you cannot dissociate or social change, participation in the political process from economic power. If you look at every process in history that has precipitated reorganization of political power, you always have behind it a redistribution or reorganization of economic power. In Nigeria, for most people, for a long time, all of the economic power was redistributed or controlled by government. And so every participation in the political process or in the social process had an element of government control. That's the reason why there's not a lot of middle class involvement in the political process. But what needs to happen is that young people today need to become more and more economically empowered, independent of the Nigeria's political economy. So we create more pay stacks, we create more flutter waves, we create more piggy vests, we create more pagas, companies that are economically successful outside of the government patronage system. And it is a linkage between people that have this kind of economic power and those that are entering into the political system, and then galvanizing a new base, a new kind of voter that will ultimately change the system. If you think about Lagos, Lagos is every election that has been won in Lagos since 1999 has been won by the party that was able to win 800,000 votes. Once you cross 800,000 votes in Lagos, you are likely to win the election. Now, Lagos is 20 million people. Let's assume half of that population is children that are not able to vote. There are 10 million people that should be voting in Lagos. Why, why is it possible to decide who wins Lagos on the basis of 800,000 votes? Those are the kind of questions we need to ask and find the linkages that help us solve those questions so that we can begin to drive the change that we need to see in society. Thank you.
All right. Now you mentioned we need more organizations such as, Flutterwave, Paystacks, and whatnot. Now, how can we merge entrepreneurship and political involvements? Because that seems to be one of entrepreneurship, or rather lack thereof, seems to be one of the drawbacks in Nigeria today.
The good thing about this is that we have templates that work at the moment. So a lot of let's look at the NSARS movement, for example, and then we'll backtrack to some of the pre-colonial movements. For example, the movements of men like Herbert Macaulay and Michael Imodu. What was the economic force that was funding those movements? It was market women like Alimoto Pelewura, who had a lot of economic power, and so they could help these men, even when they were focused fully on advocacy and driving political change. It's the same template. If you look at what happened with the core of the team, the Feminist Coalition, for example, that worked very hard on the NSARS movement, you will see that there are a lot of young women that are economically successful, that used a lot of their resources, and resources that people within that economic successful bracket could trust them with. And they brought in structures of accountability that people that do very good business use. It's the same template. We look for and create more successful entrepreneurs who are socially conscious. When that happens, linkages happen between these individuals and individuals that they can trust, that have similar ideals, that have similar goals, that have a similar vision for change on the advocacy side, on the political side, and those linkages would then begin to happen. Funds flow from them, advocacy flows from the other side, data and research flows from some people, and then political organization flows from some people. It is the nexus of this that will drive change. When all of those linkages happen and there's a flow of all of this in an environment of trust and accountability and openness.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. And please, I'd like to remind everyone once again to send in your questions and they'll be attended to as we go on. Now, I'd like to throw that same question once again. What is something concrete that the Nigerian people can do to alleviate themselves from poverty? Because this, as Dr. Henrietta mentioned, is very pivotal to social change. And instead of Dr. Henrietta, I'd like to throw that to Choma, please. Choma. All right. Seeing as Choma is not responding at the moment, we'll get back to her. But in the meantime, Charles, please, what do you think? Could they make, or rather, is it possible that the barrier be made into politics cheaper? So now we know that there's a lot of money involved in getting into politics in Nigeria. So now, and that seems to be hindering the people. So how can we break this barrier to encourage people to run for office? So it's one thing to have ideals in Nigeria, and it's another to actually, know, put in these ideals. So how can we bridge that gap between, getting into office and then the money you need to get into office?
Yeah, so I think everything is still tied to socioeconomic empowerment of young people. Because why you're not too young to run, is a success, a huge success for us as young people. Money is politics, or money drives politics, and young people. The reality now is that young people are not economically empowered to play the kind of politics that this older generation play. Right. So I think personally, as a lawyer, the target should be at campaign finances and the money it takes to get party nomination forms and money it takes to actually run campaigns, because there are laws and policies around these things, but they are not being implemented. There's a stipulated amount of money a political party must not exceed in its campaign for an election, whether at the local government chairmanship level or the governorship level or the presidential level. But these things are not checked. You're spending billions of naira running the campaign. Where would young people get that kind of money? Right? And this same campaign finances problem is also rooted, or leads to voter buying and the violence we see in political participation. So young people, basically, typically, right, from the 2015 election till today, young people just go sell their votes, be mobs, be thugs in election violence because they get some money from it, because there's no cap to campaign finances. So why not young to run bill acts as a success and all that. I think we should be clamoring for the reduction and implementation of the caps to campaign finances, party nomination forms, to allow young people participate effectively. And beyond that, young people are not empowered with regard economically. So the few businesses, the few small and medium scale enterprises that are ongoing are being killed with, over taxation, oppressive laws, oppressive taxes. So, it's quite difficult for young people to participate effectively, even if now we can participate as young people, but monetary wise, it's very difficult.
All right. Thank you very much. Like I said, we will get back to the question and answer session, but for now, we'll be taking a short break with the virtual tour of Irawa University Center.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain, I'm K. Welcome to the to your hour. Be sure to fasten your seatbelts as we foresee a mild turbulence ahead.
captured suspected rebels, it is tried and will surely face execution.
In this video, I'm going to quickly teach you how to set up GitHub checks for your Circle CI builds.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome once again to the IVAWO virtual conference. I'm Mwachwe Bunike, I'm the director of IVAWO University Center, Ibadan. IVAWO, as the video we've just seen and explained, short virtual visit has shown, is a private hub of residence for university students, male students, principally of the University of Ibadan, and is owned by Educational Corporation Society, a non-for-profit oriented body. IVAWO was established in 1969, admitted at first residence in 1972, and moved to its current and definitive site in 1990. IVAWO is one of the very few university halls of residence that are officially affiliated to the University of Ibadan. In fact, the first in Nigerian university system. And the whole aim that we try to promote in our university center is to contribute to the academic, professional, human, and cultural education of students. And for this to happen, a great emphasis, as you would have seen in the tour, is based in providing an atmosphere conducive for serious academic work. The pioneer chairman of our board was Chief Oluwakin Kugbe, and the current chairman is Engineer Emmanuel Nwobi. IVAWO essentially is an investment in people, and that's also the reason why we're having this conference or this symposium. Essentially, our core values is to promote critical and deep valued education among the residents, because studies have shown that it's where students live is very, very important in their educational formation. And that's why since inception in 1969, IVAWO has continued to do just that. Such IVAWO is not so much about bricks and walls, which after decades of being exposed to the elements still stand strong. Rather, the residence is much more about people, about study and integral education. Indeed, IVAWO University Center is not an investment in building and structures, but an investment in people. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very, very, very much for the virtual tour. And so far, thank you for your attention. Now we have the question and answer session. All right. So I'll be taking, please feel free to send in your questions if you haven't. If you think of anything, send them in as well. But for now, I'll be taking the question. And the first question I'll be taking is from Emeka. Now, Emeka is asking, he says that Paystack is exiting at $200 million and governors are sharing rabbits and kekes as youth empowerment. How can we tell them to take us seriously? And he's directed this as Dr. Henrietta.
Okay, so what exactly does he want me to talk about? Okay, I heard about Paystack and Paystack cashing out the 200 million. Well, yes. Okay, so it's going back to the fact that we talked about the need for competence, character, competence, and capability. Competence requires that you have the knowledge to understand that you don't give people fish, you teach them how to fish. I'm sure we've all heard about Bobby Wine of Uganda, who became a threat to the establishment because what he did, he was a singer. Okay, a lot of you have been asking, what can we do in our space? And I would simply say, look at Shehu Kuti, for example, who is a leader, the power of one. You can't underestimate what you can do. Shehu Kuti believes in the grassroots. And he says, look, guys, you do the same. When a rich man loots, you turn your eye. When a poor man steals something small, imagine you're imprisoning people who want to take who looted the, I mean, I won't say loot, who emptied the palliative warehouses, was it not theirs? The person who should be arrested is the person who hoarded all the palliatives that were meant for the people. But yet the people who are entitled to the palliatives are the ones who are being imprisoned. So at the end of the day, you find that once you have the wrong people, people with the wrong character in a position, and people with poor knowledge of what should be done, you're going to have what we're having in Nigeria. And that is why it is so important. So what Bobby Wine did in Uganda is really exemplary. So we don't speak too much English and we look at concrete examples. Bobby Wine was a singer, made money, went to school, and then started immediately empowering his people, okay? Paying people's school fees, helping them train, acquire one skill or the other, and he empowered them economically. Now, people who are in poverty are voiceless. If you slap your driver today, nobody cares. If you try that with a colleague in your office, there'll be mayhem. The least that will happen is that you lose your job for exerting violence in the workplace, okay? So the point is, if Nigerians are all, I mean, I'm not saying that being a driver is a respectable job, but I'm referring using it as a synonym for a low-income worker, okay? If Nigerians are all seen as low-income workers, in other words, voiceless people, then government has license. This has happened all over the world. Okay, it happened in Europe where they would forcibly take 60% of everybody's earnings, of the earnings of the aristocrats would take 60% of whatever the working class earned. And it was like that for a long time until the working class started acquiring economic power. So Bobby Wine empowered the people to the point where they saw him as a leader, as their leader. And so the government in power felt it was necessary to expel him because he was beginning to, destabilize things. And so similarly for Nigerians, if we want to see a new Nigeria, apart from educating ourselves, we have to look for ways to economically empower the poor. And luckily, there are many ways to do that in a way that creates even more wealth. Okay, so look at the young boys who are teaching people to code. When you train people to code, the next step is to train them to create apps that solve problems. Sell these apps, make money. Okay, there was the CNN hero, the young girl who went to Makoko and was teaching young girls how to code. And then the girls, the one that featured in the YouTube video explained how she had created an app for her father to be able to connect to the hotels. So he doesn't sell to the middlemen, but is able to sell directly to the hotels that need fresh fish and therefore make more money for the family than when he sells for miserable amounts to the middlemen, and then they remain poor. So this has to happen. I mean, Farm Crowd is doing it with in the agribusiness space. About 360 doing it in terms of logistics. So there's a lot that can be done. We need to each ask ourselves, what is my strength? How can I empower people in my space? So that if all of us are empowering a small group of people around us, eventually we'll be able to eradicate extreme poverty and gradually climb little by little. Today in my MBA class, we're talking about how you can take something as menial or as basic as akara or moi moi or kuli kuli and make a big business just by repackaging and changing your marketing strategy, putting it in branding it, putting it in a nice packaging and putting it in supermarkets, or going online and delivering to people, and people can begin to order for parties if they like what you deliver to them for a snack or as a meal. And gradually the person can grow. And of course, as you grow, what happens? You need to employ people to work for you, and you also empower those people. So empowerment of the masses, financial empowerment is important. I don't even think that the youth are held, well, I think a bit differently from Charles when he says young people don't have the money. I mean, we saw how during the NSAS protest, there was a very well synchronized move of donations that brought in enough money to keep funding the protests, and it would have continued but for the shootings. Okay, so the point here is there are many innovative ways to galvanize funding. I think it's more of having a plan that can lead to sustained and a sustained preparation and effective results. Because we must have political parties of people who are committed to the common good. Okay, people who are committed to the development of the country rather than to the development of their pockets before we can begin to, face 2023 with, credible parties to vote for.
All right, thank you very much. Now, directed at Charles, So there's a massive gap between, the government and the people, if it's in terms of, social class or economic class. Now, during elections, how can we enforce economic fair play? Because you mentioned something about there being a cap on which people can spend during elections. So how can we enforce economic fair play during elections?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, there shouldn't. I'm not saying there should be a cap. I'm saying there is a cap. It's just it's not being enforced, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So the burden is on the INEC to ensure that political parties and candidates do not exceed certain caps.
Sorry, you're muffled. You're muffled, please. Could you please adjust your microphone?
Okay, is it better now?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah. So these policies that ensure a fair playing ground in campaigns and an election period, it's there already. They just need to be enforced. These policies are there, but they need to be strengthened and implemented. So currently INEC should be the body overseeing this thing. But my suggestion is that both EFCC, the anti-corruption agencies we have, should have fundamental roles in playing in ensuring that political parties and candidates, because if you're spending such an amount of money, of course, the anti-corruption bodies should, be interested in knowing your source of income. Who are the people or organizations or companies donating to that candidate or donating to that political parties? So that fair playing ground, the policies and framework are there. They just need to be implemented. So beyond INEC, I believe citizens should be involved in tracking these campaign finances to make the campaigns and elections fair for everyone. And the same policy framework, I remember, talks about publication, audited accounts of these political parties being publicized, submitted to INEC and publicized in the website, but these things are not being done. So to kind of add something, I think Mrs. Henrietta was mentioning something that the young people do have the money to spend in elections, right?
Right.
And yeah, and she made reference to the NSAS protest and how young people were able to mobilize resources, to bring medical aid and food and legal aid to victims and to protesters. But a chunk of that money, yeah, I mean, young people in Nigeria donated a whole lot, but a chunk of that money came from the diaspora community, right? So while I believe that young people have the resources to participate effectively, I think we are not where we want to be, because the economic realities in Nigeria are not favorable for young people, and that is the truth. We're talking about loans, the loans that the Ministry of Youth is going to participate in disbursing, the 75 million grants or something like that. But who has received it yet? Who has received it? So for me, I think young people do not have the kind of resources to effectively participate in the federal level in campaigns and elections, perhaps in the local level. And of course, the violence too is another factor that scares young people from participating. So until the laws and until the policies and until the frameworks are favorable, it's going to be a barrier for young people in elections.
All right. Thank you. Now, to Tunde. So it's obvious. Someone says that, Naimeka says that it is obvious that all the thuggery, ballot stuffing, and ballot snatching aren't carried out by the elderly politicians or by the youth. How then can the youth be dissuaded from helping to rig in corrupt elections?
Thanks a lot. Interestingly, we've been doing some research and just looking at numbers. And one of the things that we've found, our preliminary findings, is that elections and electoral violence usually happen significantly more or have significantly more impact when electoral turnout is low. So the lower the turnout, the higher the impact of electoral violence and thuggery and ballot box stuffing. because here's what the politicians do, and they run the numbers and they know the numbers. They know the places where they can go, and because they know the numbers, they know which areas to go and stuff ballot boxes that will have an outlandish impact on the overall. I mean, there's no politician anywhere, there's no political structure anywhere that can stuff ballot boxes in every polling unit or every ward or every local government in the nation. None. There's none that has that kind of structure. But what politicians will do is to cultivate certain areas and decide and say, in this area, to use an analogy, the popular Niger Delta riverine areas in the creeks, in the Niger Delta, for example, the politicians that take that as a, once I can stuff ballot boxes in this place, I can declare any numbers. But the truth is, when you look at the actual numbers, you see that I gave the example of Lagos. The threshold is 800,000, and it's what Stacey Adams did in Georgia, where she looked at the number and she said, how many, okay, I got denied the opportunity to run and all of that because of certain things. And she said to herself, you know what, fine, that opportunity didn't come to me. But how many new voters do I need to get onto the books so that this is impossible to do? And she brought in, I forget the number, is it 800,000 new voters in Georgia? And it became impossible for the Republicans to do what they did to her during the general elections. So if we look at, I don't think it's 800,000 numbers, I forget the exact numbers now, but that effort, just to buttress Charles's point, that effort cost $33 million to do. So it costs money to mobilize for political purposes, and we always need to find the economic centers that would fund these efforts. But having said that, the real question is not how do we stop people from being thugs. There's a bit you can do in that area, but the real question is how do we make the efforts of thugs have little or zero impact on the electoral process. Once that happens, the way political actors think is once something is ineffective in impacting the outcome of elections, it becomes an option that they don't explore. So once thuggery has no impact in the outcome of the elections, most politicians will drop thuggery as an option to explore. How do we do that? We make sure people register massively. We make sure people turn out to vote. So those are the campaigns that we need to drive. Register massively, turn out to vote, get into the political system and contest. Those three things, we can't overemphasize how important they are to eliminate many of the things that we would like to eliminate in our political discourse.
All right, thank you very much. And then I'd like to move on to Dr. Henrietta. And so Tayo asks that Henrietta speak about building economic circles beyond techies and creatives outside of government while avoiding a monopoly of economic power and political ideas.
Okay, so it sort of dovetails into what I was going to say based on what Tunde just spoke about, which was about using thugs to upturn the elections. Okay, well, to start with, those thugs themselves are human beings who can be educated and transformed. And this is part of the education I was speaking about earlier. It's not just about education. I mean, we saw how, we said the youth were the ones who did the end-house protest, but the youth were in two categories: the privileged youth, youth one, and the underprivileged youth, youth two. And it was the underprivileged youth who are typically the ones who are barely educated, who were used to, first of all, it started by using them to fight the youth one protesters, and then eventually were hired to go around doing the looting, looting of businesses. Now, the wisdom, what that tells us is that when we talk about enlightening the electorate with information and knowledge to empower them, we're not only looking at empowering people like you and I who are online, who have smartphones and all of that, okay? We need to get to the grassroots people. I was very happy to see that already people like Brother Shaggy, have video skits helping people to understand why they shouldn't take money to go and assassinate people or do all kinds of things to curb election, but rather to turn back and ask those people to bring their children to join them. They want them to do all those things because they too have mothers. Okay, so it is so important that this enlightenment is brought. I think what's her name? One of the panelists, the other female panelists spoke about it. Educating the grassroots. They need to know that the reason for their poverty are the kind of people who have been in power for a long time. Because when these people come and when these people give them money towards elections, they see them as benefactors, at least temporarily. And then they go, and there were also cases during the NSAS protests when you saw them say, yeah, I'm going to take their money, but I'm going to do anything to you. They were admitting to the protesters that they had been sent to attack, okay? So connecting this with Tayo's question about how we can create economic centers goes back to what I was saying before. If we're able to empower this, look, poverty feeds corruption. The bane of Nigeria's problem is people wanting to personally enrich themselves irrespective of what happens to the national economy. I mean, we're hearing of borrowings upon borrowings, but we're not seeing any projects being carried out, which suggests that these borrowings are going into personal pockets. Okay, so the point is, if we're going to, and that is going to further impoverish the masses, because we are the ones who are going to bear the brunt of the high food costs, high power costs, high fuel costs, all of this. And then when we go into crisis, we're the ones who are not protected by security. So it's important that we begin to ask ourselves how we can begin to empower people. I spoke about the construction school skills training academy. The same thing can be said for a tailoring academy. Fashion is big business. You have a tailoring academy where you put in people free of charge, train them, they can begin to work for us, and we can begin to either make uniforms for businesses, hospitals, schools. That will require engaging people and paying them salaries. We can even begin to export our amazing Nigerian fashions, which will also bring in a lot of foreign currency. Look, Nigeria's devaluation is the way the Naira has been falling. Naira has lost about 35% in about 8 months, okay? While it is a horror, there's still a way to make it an advantage, and that is from exporting. Nigeria's currency is lower than that of Kenya, Ghana, okay, and many other African countries, which means that if we export to these countries, we sell for more. If we export to Europe and America, we also bring in more. So we need to be geared at exports. And I wish our government would also make the export process easy, but hey, there are agents that facilitate the export process, okay? So, and there are several things we have here. One of the reasons why we're not being so affected by COVID is because we have a lot of herbs and things that are helping us develop more resistance. Okay, we're not testing as much as European countries, which means that we probably have many people with this infection, but we're able to resist it because of the kind of things we have. Now we can explore those solutions. Okay, we can grow herbal gardens. Okay, dry and package, make them into tablets, sell them as tea leaves in tea bags or whatever. I mean, they're Chinese teas. Anywhere you go in the world, whether you're in the UK or in America, you will find Chinese teas. You will find Chinese restaurants. Why can't you find Nigerian teas, Nigerian restaurants around? Okay, so and there's so many Nigerians in the diaspora that there's a huge market waiting for everything we have here that can turn our devaluation into an advantage, because when we bring in foreign currency and you convert it to Naira, it's a lot. Okay, so I would simply say, like Bobby Wine, okay, in our different spheres, what do we know and can teach other people to do with us so that we can create an economy, a local economy? It is imperative that we all begin to think in terms of shared prosperity, because so long as there's massive poverty, corruption will continue to reign supreme, and government will not be accountable to us because we're too poor to matter. But when the masses begin to be empowered financially, okay, and therefore have more of a voice, you compel government to accountability, because they know that when they do things, people will rise up and speak, as they're beginning to speak now. So it's of utmost, I think, economic empowerment and eradication of poverty is of utmost importance for us to see a new Nigeria. It also helps the people we're trying to educate to be enlightened enough to vote right, be able to listen. When you're hungry, you don't hear anything. You can't understand anything. So we must empower people, not by giving them fish, like they're giving them trader money, 5,000 naira. What does that do? Nothing. But by giving them, equipping them with a skill with which to earn a living. Okay? And there's so much you can do. I mean, get fruits in season, empower them. Let's plug these things, wash them, squeeze them, put them in bottles, sell them to hotels, sell them to schools, sell them to offices. Okay, people are discerning, sell them to gyms. That's business. Okay, tie-dye, that is business. People are looking for handcrafted things. And today you don't even need to own a shop. There's Instagram, there's Facebook business, there's WhatsApp business. Okay, so there's so many ways you can sell online, which also creates jobs for those who are in logistics and those who are into digital marketing. So there's just so much we need to sit down and do, because it is imperative that we aggressively address the poverty issue. Because if we don't, as I said before, we can talk till the kingdom come, governments will continue with impunity.
All right, thank you. And now back to Tunde. Now, how can young people build and sustain movements with tangible outcomes that are able to overcome the religious and ethnic fault lines that is not only characterized, that has not only characterized, but also used by the Nigerian establishment to squash any social change? This is from Mwachukwu.
Who is the question directed to?
So it's directed to Tunde, please.
Okay.
I suspect that Dr. Henrietta wants to answer that question. Just so you guys know, Dr. Henrietta was my lecturer in LBS not very long ago. So, so I've listened to her talk about these things in person many times. But to the question, we've had many examples, both in our country and outside our country, of how movements have been organized and movements have been sustained, not just by young people, but by people generally, to, irrespective of their differences, to achieve very clear change goals. The first and most important thing that needs to be found is common interests, common grounds, because there would always be differences. And as long as the people within the movement emphasize their differences or emphasize their emphasize the things that are not common ground, common interests, and do not respect those differences, then that movement cannot be galvanized. And one of the things, now there are fundamental differences that mean that we shouldn't come into a movement with certain people. So if somebody holds Nazi beliefs, for example, or if somebody denies something as fundamental as the killings that happened in Lekki, for example, recently, there's no point galvanizing a movement with that kind of person. But outside of that, there will be people that will be Christians, Muslims, atheists, all very fundamentally different belief systems, but can find common ground in the fact that we want Nigeria to be better, and make that the core of their conversations, make that the core of what they want to drive, and organize around it. If you think about the June 12 activists, for example, in Nigeria, they were people of diverse backgrounds, very diverse, but they were able to focus on the fact that we want democracy in Nigeria, and we are not going to rest until the military leaves, and push that agenda together in spite of their differences, ethnic, political. And in fact, as soon as that happened, many of those activists broke into different political parties to contest for power. So it's not, the fact that we organize and galvanize for a certain goal doesn't mean that we won't then contest for power. What happened in 1999 in Nigeria, a tragedy, is that many of the activists turned their noses up at the political system. And many of the opportunists within the movement were the ones that embraced the political system. By the time those guys got into political office and became entrenched, activists then tried to organize parties like the National Conscience Party and co, but it was difficult to dislodge the entrenched people at that time. We can't afford to make those kinds of mistakes now. So to summarize, we find what are the things that we want that are common ground in Nigeria today that we want to change and organize around those common grounds. The NSAS movement, people could organize around that common ground because it is a common problem that everybody across Nigeria has. Security currently is a common problem across Nigeria to various degrees. It's something that can be organized around. The economic situation of the country is a common problem. You're not buying Gari cheaper in Lagos because you are in PDP or APC. You're not buying Gari cheaper because you're in the north or the east. Those are common problems that can be organized around and made the centerpiece of movements that we all then drive together. Look, when we use that as a way to achieve change, we get two things. We get practice. The political system recognizes that these people are serious, and we get a platform to negotiate with the system and change the system. So all of that's really the core of the point. Find common ground, make that the centerpiece of the movement, focus on that. After we achieve, we can begin to compete for power again, but we can do it together. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very, very much. And lastly, we have the final question, which is to Dr. Henrietta. Now, it says that as Nigerians, it's being asked as Nigerians, what should we unanimously be focused on to have a formidable voice?
I think, first of all, security, okay? That's just like Tunde said, there's certain things that are common to everybody, okay? The security issues have become a real concern that we should all be up in arms about. I sometimes ask myself, what is it that triggers Nigerians? Because the way we fought back the attempts to call Unilag Moshood Abiola University was so aggressive and so loud that it was repressed in a short time. And I haven't seen us, yes, I've seen the newspapers with headlines saying the president should resign, etc., etc. But I think that we need to, it has to be more sustained, okay? We can't just hear that 110 farmers who went to do their legitimate work were killed and we all keep quiet. And then every night we hear people sleeping peacefully in their homes were hacked to death. It's something we should remain uncomfortable with and, really continue to do some, not just complain about, as we said about the protest. Protest is a stage and it's stage one. The next thing is prepare for the 2023 elections. Similarly, we've talked about the security situation, but the question is, what are we doing? So I've seen an attempt in Lagos State with Amoteku. I've not heard much about it, okay? But I think that every state should really be preparing to protect their people from what could begin to cascade, okay? I've seen open broadcasts where they say Fulani from all over the world should come because Nigeria is their home, and until they take up the whole of Nigeria, they won't rest. These are not statements to be taken lightly, okay? Nigerians are accommodating, there's space for everybody, but you can't want to overtake everybody. And so I think that, I don't know, I mean, it's important that we look at this. So security is one, and again, security is a big business. I know that at least there are many companies that are making a lot of money from protecting homes, especially on the island, okay? And I think that they can extend this by creating and, training people who can protect people who are traveling or, going outside Lagos too, okay? So I that's one. Then the next thing is economic empowerment, okay? Nobody is safe. As Falade Rotier says, and a privileged few in an impoverished environment are endangered species. We're all endangered species to some extent. You can't have poverty all around you and then you have a nice car and a nice house and you think you're going to be safe for long. It's a question of time. And then when they attack, we can't say you're really innocent. You didn't do it to them. You're not government. No, each of us has to be our brother's keeper. The other day, I saw how Gidi Mobile posted something on LinkedIn about how they gave someone free access to education on a gate man, a security man, free access to learning on their mobile app, and so he was able to pass JAM and go to university. And they told him that as long as he gets good grades, they'll give him a scholarship. Next thing I saw was that he said he has sent his results in his first year. He made 5 A's, 1 B, and 1 C, and that his school fees were due, and the school fees was 26,500, and they had sent him another 30,000. So you can imagine how many Nigerians are out of school because of just 30,000 or much less. In some places, it's just 5,000, and they can't afford to go to school. And such people eventually become, criminals or thugs or kidnappers or terrorists or join terrorist gangs to survive. Okay, how many of such people can we help? I've said before, that's not a question of giving people fish, but teaching them how to fish. Okay, and I'm thinking of it, and I think people need to come together. Okay, I don't underestimate youth. There are so many creative ways to raise funds. I've seen young people organize activities in Hilton Abuja, and they get everything free of charge because they walk into the office of the person in charge and they say, look, we're doing this to help raise funds for IDPs, and we need 10 rooms because we're bringing in artists who want to play music, and then people will come in and they will pay, and we need that money to help people in the IDP camps. And the manager signs on and says, yes, I'm going to give you 10 rooms free of charge. And this was about maybe 5 years ago, when the cheapest room in Nikon Hilton per night was 60,000 naira. By now, it should be well over 100,000 naira. And these children got it free. They were young people, they got it free of charge. And they said to me, our office is free because they know what we're doing. And they put on the generator for us when we come in and we need power to work. So there are many creative ways to get what you want done. The key thing we must understand is that we must organize ourselves to empower the less privileged. It will empower them, it will secure us, and it will give us a stronger voice to oppose impunity in governance. This will be my take.
All right, thank you very much. Now, before we have the votes of thanks, shortly from each of the speakers present, we'll have one final say, or rather, we want them to give short pieces to the Nigerian youth. I'm starting with Charles, please. Charles. Okay, okay, Charles.
I didn't get the last thing you said.
I said, please, could you just of advice to the Nigerian youth? Okay, it seems like Charles is having some issues, so we'll come back to Charles. But so I'd like to move on to Tunde.
All right. I think for me, one of my favorite sayings is that youth is not a virtue. Youth is not a virtue. So the organizing principle for any movement cannot be youth. The organizing principle for any social impact cannot be youth. It has to be something more encompassing, because there is wisdom to be gotten from people that are not youth. There is experience, there's organizational skills. So we need to be open to what are we organizing for, and what are we organizing? What's the criteria for being part of the organizing? And it cannot be youth. Having said that, we, however, need to bring to bear those things we've talked about, find economic empowerment, linkages between these economic empowerment centers and the political movements, the advocacy movements, and ensure that we participate in the political process, either on the voting side or in the electoral side, or even on the policy making side. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now back to Charles. Charles, are you here now?
Yeah, please, I'm here. Sorry about the network issue.
No problem. So your piece, please, your piece of advice to the Nigerian youth.
Yeah, I think political apathy is a problem, and in fact, apathy of citizens. A lot of young people, do not feel the need to participate in nation building, and to an extent, it's not their fault. But we have seen that a whole lot of things have been achieved through the NSAS protest. And trust me, when the protest began, it wasn't organized. It wasn't a group calling out people to come protest. It was just few people on the streets tweeting their location, tweeting their demands, and people coming in to rally behind them and demand, with a single voice. So I think young people should always unify around causes affecting all of us as young people. Political participation, unemployment, poverty, and all these things. So I think we should be able to unite our voices more and demand accountability from the government, whether in human rights or other aspects. Thank you very much.
All right. And lastly, Dr. Henrietta, please, before the vote of thanks.
All right, so I'll just say, I think that everybody should strive to be part of the solution. Let's not stop at complaining or lamenting. That does not solve any problem. So we need to strive to make a difference. And we do this by developing our character, okay, building our competence. And knowledge is power. Build your competence by trying to find out, okay? So how does government function? Political literacy, okay, build your political literacy. And then of course, capacity, decide where you can take action, okay? Where you can make a difference. Well, even if all you can do is just to tweet or to do video skits or whatever, okay? Again, I like to go back to Sheon Kuti, who has been very, very expressive on social media, YouTube, television, and he's sent Mr. Macaroni as well. I mean, on Rise TV. So it's nothing. Everything makes a difference. But don't be indifferent. Don't be passive. The power of one is more than you can. It shouldn't be underestimated. Okay, so take action. Be a part of the solution. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very, very much. Thank you to all the panelists and to everyone present here. Okay, so finally, we'll have the vote of thanks by Benedict Afolami.
Yeah, thank you, Eniafe. Our most valued panelists, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks of this occasion. I, on behalf of the IRAL Virtual Symposium and the entire team, crew, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all the panelists for gracing this occasion and sharing with us your findings and opinions today. To Dr. Mr. Arenta, I say a very big thank you to you for making our time out of a very busy schedule to be with us this afternoon. To Mr. Charles, representing Mr. Amzad Lawal, your inspiring words are very much appreciated. To Mrs. Choma, we love the work you're doing to equip young women to face the 21st century challenges. To Mr. Tunde, I say a very big thank you for gracing the symposium with your presence. You are indeed very appreciated. I also like to use this opportunity to place on record our hearty thanks to Ibukwan Folami for making this the virtual video available in such a short notice. I also want to extend my many thanks to Nwachukwu Ebunike, the director of our University Center, Emmanuel Obi Anthony, for making the teaser video, and for Inafia, a moderator, Michael Obina Wally, for all the splendid work you've done towards the planning and execution of the symposium. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot thank everyone enough for their involvement and their willingness to take on the completion of tasks beyond their comfort zone. We thank you for being with us this afternoon. It's been a very, very great pleasure. Thank you very, very much.
All right, thank you, everyone. Now, briefly, as I mentioned at the beginning of the forum, please, could everyone briefly just turn on their videos for a quick screenshot, if that's fine with you all. Thank you very much. I hope everyone has their cameras on.
The smiles are finishing. Okay. Our smiles are finishing.
Say cheese, everyone. Cheese.
Cheese. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. Okay.
All right, everybody. Thank you very, very much for participating in this year's virtual forum. And I hope to see you all next year. Thank you and have a great evening.
Many thanks. Thank you.